All right, let's get into a story that is just wild. It all starts in a regular old grocery shop, but believe me, it ends up shaking the very foundations of the British Constitution. It's a perfect example of how a seemingly small, everyday action can lead to these huge, nation-changing consequences.
I know, it sounds kind of ridiculous, doesn't it? But that's the big question we're tackling today. How on earth did a simple dispute over weights and measures, pounds versus kilograms, blow up into a landmark legal case that ended up redefining the most fundamental laws in the United Kingdom?
So who was at the heart of this whole thing? Well, it wasn't some high-flying politician or a member of the royal family. Nope, it was a group of regular shopkeepers who got this really dramatic nickname, the Metric Martyrs.
Our main character, if you will, is a guy named Steve Thoburn, a greengrocer from Sunderland. And his crime? It was pretty simple. He was using a scale that measured only in pounds and ounces, which was technically against a new regulation. It seems like such a minor thing, right? But that was the tiny spark that lit a massive constitutional fire.
And this quote really gets to the heart of what they were feeling. For them, this wasn't just about defying the law for the sake of it. It was about their customers, it was about tradition, and honestly, it was about a sense of personal freedom. They felt like they were being forced into a change that neither they nor their communities actually wanted.
So, this is where it starts to get really interesting. Steve Thulburn's case went from his market stall all the way to the courtroom, and in doing so, it uncovered this huge legal puzzle. It was a direct clash between two very powerful laws.
Okay, so check this out. This lays out the conflict perfectly. On one side, you've got the UK's own Weights and Measures Act from 1985. Now, this was the most recent law on this specific topic, and it said using pounds and ounces was totally fine. But on the other side, you have the European Communities Act from way back in 1972. And that was the big one, the law that took Britain into the EU in the first place and required it to follow European rules, like the one saying you had to use metric units.
Now, this brings us to a bedrock principle of British law called implied repeal. It basically just says that if two laws conflict, the newer one wins. The 1985 Weights and Measures Act was definitely newer than the 1972 European Communities Act. So, case closed, right? The grocer should win. Well, it wasn't nearly that simple.
And this, right here, is where our story takes its most dramatic turn. The judges in the High Court didn't just pick a winner between the two laws. They did something completely unexpected, something that would literally change UK law forever.
Yeah, instead of just applying the old rules, the court decided the rules themselves needed an update. They saw that some laws are simply more important, more fundamental than others, and they needed a special status to protect them. And this is it. This is the big idea they came up with, the constitutional statute. The crucial point is this. A constitutional statute is a law so important to the fabric of the nation that it can't be brushed aside by accident. Sure, Parliament can still change it, but it has to do so clearly, deliberately, and on purpose. So what does this actually mean in practice? Well, essentially, the court created a two-tiered system for the UK's laws, something that had never formally existed before. It works like this. On the bottom level, you have your ordinary statutes, the day-to-day laws Parliament passes. The Weights and Measures Act was one of these. But above them, you now have this new category, constitutional statutes. And the new rule is that a simple, ordinary law cannot silently override one of these foundational, constitutional ones. So what counts as a constitutional statute? Well, think of the greatest hits of British legal history, the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, but the court made a crucial addition to this list. You guessed it, the European Communities Act of 1972, the very law that brought the UK into the European Union. And with that, the puzzle was solved. The court declared the European Communities Act a constitutional statute. This meant the later, but ordinary, Weights and Measures Act could not override it. Steve Thoburn, the metric martyr, lost his case. The EU law stood firm.
But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. The real impact of this case wasn't about pounds or kilograms at all. It was about the powerful legal tool it created, a tool that would become hugely important years later.
I mean, just look at this timeline. The concept born in 2002 to settle a dispute about fruit scales became absolutely central to the Brexit debates. When the UK voted to leave the EU, this very legal framework was used by the Supreme Court to navigate the unprecedented challenges of untangling UK and EU law, especially in arguments about the Prime Minister's power versus Parliament's.
So, the crucial takeaway is this. A seemingly minor case about a grocer's right to use imperial weights created a profound and permanent shift in the UK's constitutional landscape. It gave judges a new way to protect what they see as the most important laws of the land.
And that leaves us with a fascinating final question. The traditional view in the UK is that Parliament is supreme. It can make or unmake any law. But if judges can now designate certain laws as constitutional and give them special protection, who really has the final say? It's a debate that started with a pound of bananas, and it's one that continues to shape the United Kingdom today.